Swadika. Welcome to TDRI Channel, the program that offers you insights into the hotly debated topics in the Thai society. Our topic today is how to improve the governance of the state-owned enterprises in Thailand. Currently, there are 56 state-owned enterprises or SOE covering various sectors such as infrastructure, financial, as well as healthcare. These SOEs have contributed significantly to the Thai economy by providing employment, extra sources of income, as well as basic infrastructures which are crucial to the Thai economy. However, currently, there are 10 SOEs which were reported to have serious financial problems, including the Thai Airways and State Railway of Thailand. And many people are saying that the root cause of the problem is nothing but the lack of good governance. So, how can we improve the governance of state-owned enterprises in Thailand? Let's discuss this together with Dr. Deunden Nikomborirak, Research Director at TDRI. สวัสดีค่ะ สวัสดีค่ะ So, Dr. Deunden, first of all, could you tell us what are SOE in Thailand? To what extent the state actually control or oversee these enterprises?
The definition of state-owned enterprises are actually diverse. We have many laws that provide definition from state-owned enterprises. But let's use the most frequent quoted ones are the definition that is mentioned in the budget law, BE 2502. The definition of state-owned enterprises in that particular law is that any enterprises that the state, meaning state enterprises themselves, hold equity share over 50%.
Over 50.
Yes, so because of that definition, we have about, like you mentioned, 56 enterprises that are owned directly by the Ministry of Finance.
Okay.
That is to be called the mother state enterprises. And there are the daughters and sons state enterprises that are subsidiaries of the mother state enterprises. That means enterprises as state-owned enterprise own more than half. These are considered the subsidiaries of state-owned enterprises that are not so much regulated by the Ministry of Finance. So there are about over 300 or 400 of subsidiaries of state-owned enterprises that would be considered state-owned enterprises under the definition of the budget law as well.
You mentioned that there are subsidiaries state-owned enterprises.
Yes.
Can the government oversee these enterprises, or will it be controlled by the board of the mother state-owned enterprises?
Technically, the government can control these subsidiaries because, as I mentioned, they are considered state-owned enterprises by the budget law. So the Ministry of Finance has the supervision power authority over them. But in practice, the state-owned enterprise section of the Ministry of Finance, we call them SEPO, State Enterprise Policy Office, does not have the capacity to monitor the over 300 subsidiaries. They cannot even tell how many of these subsidiaries exist today. As a result, the state supervision of state enterprises are currently limited in practice only to the 56 enterprises whose shares are directly held by the Ministry of Finance.
So one of the problems is that the government does not have enough capacity to oversee every state-owned enterprises.
That's correct, and that as a result, many of the mismanagement or the undesirable governance are hidden in these subsidiaries. For example, there are many subsidiaries of state-owned enterprises that pay excessively high compensation to the board of directors. That cannot be done if it were the mother enterprises that is subject to strict regulation by the Ministry of Finance and also scrutinized by the public. But at the subsidiaries level, they can do that because it escapes the eyes of the masses.
In your opinion, what constitutes a characteristic of good governance?
I think the conventional literature on good governance would say that the key feature of good governance would be transparency. Mm-hmm. And transparency, I would say, means mainly disclosure of information. So I see that good state-owned enterprise will disclose vital information such as procurement information, compensation of board of directors, and even the minutes of the meeting of the board of directors in deciding major decisions. They should provide the reasons, the information or data that back up such decisions. And I would consider that to be a transparent management. Another aspect is the accountability. That means if something goes wrong, if there is mismanagement, the personnel responsible, be it the CEO or the board of directors, will have to be reliable for the performance of the state-owned enterprises. Mm-hmm. But in the past, we see that in most cases, even when the state-owned enterprise is run aground, nobody seems to be held accountable for the very bad performance.
So, transparency and accountability.
Yes, correct.
Could you give us some examples of state-owned enterprises in Thailand or overseas that have good governance according to your suggestion?
I think in Thailand there has been many rewards given to state-owned enterprises on the basis of good governance by the National Anti-Corruption Commission, and also the Stock Exchange of Thailand has also handed out corporate governance awards to particular state enterprises. But I think these rewards mainly look at only a particular angle of the governance of state enterprises. So I'm not sure whether, even if they're given the reward, whether they really function entirely as good governance. But TDRI itself has also assessed a dimension of governance, which is the disclosure of procurement rules, because this is required by the cabinet decision. We looked at all 57 state-owned enterprises and ranked which state enterprises provide the best information on procurement. Because as you know, most corruption is related to procurement.
You mean provide information on
the
their
procurement
website?
Yes. For example, what projects was procured when, who submitted the bid, who won the bid, the name of the company that won the bid, the price there was one. These, and even the terms of reference of the bid. I think these are very crucial. When we ranked that, tobacco monopoly came first. Is a state enterprise that sell tobacco for cigarettes came first, and also the National Science and Technology Research Institute also came out on the top.
I understand that information disclosure is required by law, right, on the procurement information.
Yes, actually the law only says they have to advertise in the Royal Gazette, which nobody reads. So as a result, back about 8-9 years ago, the cabinet issued a cabinet decision that the procurement decision will have to be disclosed in the website as well. And I think that makes a difference because information that is disclosed on the website is publicly accessible. So that's why TDRI want to evaluate the extent of transparency of state-owned enterprise by evaluating to what extent do they disclose the procurement according to the cabinet decision.
And what about accountability? You gave an example of state-owned enterprise which has good records of information disclosure. Can you give us an example of state-owned enterprise that perhaps has strategy or designed to have the board, for example, to have accountability to that performance?
I'm afraid I cannot Unfortunate. And why? Basically, if you are to be held accountable, you have to have a very clear mandate, a very clear objective of what you are supposed to deliver. But if you don't have a clear mandate, it's very difficult to hold you accountable for anything. And in the past, it has been a problem that state-owned enterprises are never given a clear mandate, what that they have to deliver, because politicians come and go, and each government seems to have their own mandate in what they want the state-owned enterprise to deliver. As a result, I think it's difficult to hold state-owned enterprise accountable because in most cases it is political intervention. It is politicians that ordering the state-owned enterprise to do X, Y, Z. But it's never clear, is it the state-owned enterprise's own initiation, own mismanagement, or the order of the politicians?
Right.
So if you want to hold accountable, I think state-owned we will have to be able to tell who gives the order.
And how can this be delivered?
How can this be done? I think we have to change the entire way in which state-owned enterprises function. That they should not operate at the whims of the politicians, but they have to have a very clear mandate and scope of work. To my knowledge, the Ministry of Finance has tried to do that. They have issued so-called the Statement of Direction, the SOD, because the Ministry of Finance reckon that they are the shareholders, the owner of state-owned enterprise. So they should give state-owned enterprise the direction that they want them to go. But again, this is the initiation of the Ministry of Finance alone. But you have to realize that state-owned enterprises have two bosses. One is the Ministry of Finance, which owns the share. The other is the Ministry of Finance, in which is come under the purview. For example, if you are Thai Airways, you have two bosses. One boss is Ministry of Finance, the other boss is Ministry of Transport.
Right.
So only one boss is giving you a direction, but the other boss has no direction. So state-owned enterprises is a very confused entity.
Recently, there is a so-called super board appointed by the NCPO in order to supervise all, I understand not all of them, but the state-owned enterprises which are facing financial problems. In your opinion, what should be the first step the super board should take in order to reform these problem state-owned enterprise?
I think they are looking at all enterprises, but I think they have 4 tasks. One of the tasks is to solve the immediate task is to solve the financial problems of several state-owned enterprises that are on the brink of bankruptcy. But I think the task is to regulate and to overhaul the governance. In terms of regulation, they now require that any procurement above 100 million baht, I think, have to go through this super board. And basically, that is to say, we have a lot of problem in state-owned enterprise procurement, and we want to screen all procurements, centralize the procurement. And at the same time, they have to solve the more immediate problem of financial hardship of certain state-owned enterprises. I think their mandate also in longer term, that is a short term, how do you solve financial problems? But I think in the longer term is the issue of governance, as you say. How can we ensure that state-owned enterprises function as it should and not be subject to political intervention and manipulated by political objectives? So this is a very difficult question for the super board. But I think they have to think about that because super board will not be here forever. So they have to change the system, not change the board of directors. So far, they begin by changing the board of directors of the state-owned enterprises with problem. As you see, for example, PTT and PTT, for example, have changed board. And several, I think the State Railway of Thailand will change the board of directors. So there will be a lot of new boards of directors. But again, that is not a long-term solution, that is short-term solution. And I think what they have to do is they have to think of the long-term solution.
And in your opinion, what should be the long-term solution?
In my opinion, what I'd like to see,
yes,
I think fixing these boards and trying to solve the financial problem is not getting at the root cause of the problem. I think the biggest question that the super board should take a look is, do we need these state-owned enterprises?
Right.
And I think in many cases the answer would be no. So if you don't need these state-owned enterprises, you don't have to bother with this problem if you just dissolve it. But getting rid of state enterprises, it's a very politically sensitive issue, as you know. But I think the only key issue is, what do you do with the employees? If you don't have the opposition from the employees, I think you can go ahead. And I think there are many ways in which you can take care of the employees so that they do not have to face uncertainties in their changing status from state-owned enterprise employees into private sector employees, or unemployed for that matter.
Thank you very much for very useful and insightful information, Dr. Deunden.
You're most welcome.
Thank you very much for watching, and we hope to see you at the next topic very soon. Thank you very much.